Hello, and welcome to the FarmHouse. I'm Candace Wierzbowski.
And I'm Stephanie Spiker.
Recently, I spoke with Doris Mold, one of the co-CEOs of Annie's Project. Annie's Project is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering women in agriculture. It was founded in 2003 and named after Annette Kohlhagen Fleck, a woman who grew up to marry a farmer and then take on the business side of the farm. She did this in the middle of the 1900s when it wasn't common to have a woman managing the books. But she did it, and now Annie's Project honors her legacy by providing women with the knowledge and confidence to manage farms and agribusinesses successfully. The organization offers a mix of workshops, courses, and online learning, and it helps educate women in ag on things like risk management, business planning, financial literacy, like the business side of running a farm. So, Steph, my question for you is, have you ever been in an all-female learning environment?
Yeah. Now that I'm I had to really think and pause and go back. But yes, I have.
Did you notice anything maybe different when you were in a class with all women as opposed to a mixed class?
I feel like it was a little easier to have discussion and ask questions and just talk to each other and be a little more kind of open and honest about what you're talking about and learning,
Yeah.
You can be a little more vulnerable, I think, women among women.
Yes, I completely agree. I had a couple classes in college that were either all women or almost all women and then maybe one or two guys. And I did also notice it's subtle at times, the difference in the atmosphere, but it's definitely there. And like you said, I feel like women are just more likely to talk openly when they're among other women. And it might be because they're worried that the men might be disinterested or turned off by whatever they're saying. But yeah, I feel like as a group, we just feel a little freer and we can concentrate on what we need to concentrate. Well, learning in an all-female or mostly female environment was something that Doris and I discussed. So let's see what she has to say about it. Doris, welcome to the FarmHouse.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's jump right in. Tell me about Annie's Project. What's the history there?
All right. Well, Annie's Project was started in 2003, and our founder, Ruth Hambleton, started Annie's Project. She, at that time, was a farm business management specialist, extension educator in Illinois. And as she looked at things, she saw that women's needs weren't necessarily getting met when it came to education about farm business management, risk management. And she saw that from her experience, but then she also had earlier experience with her mother. And that's where the name Annie's comes from. Her mother was the original Annie. And Annie had grown up in town and married a farm boy. So she moved out to the farm and farmed alongside her husband. And over time, they thought it would be a good idea for her husband to get a job in town. And so Annie became the main farmer then. And not having had the experience, and also at that time being a female in farming, she had some challenges that Ruth observed growing up. And as Ruth became an adult, she remembered those challenges Mom had had. And then the women she was working with, and they were usually parts of farm families. And she thought, gosh, I could do something about this. I could start some programs that could address women's questions and also look at the way women learn rather than the way men learn, and come up with a good environment for women to learn these things that Mom didn't know about and that I'm seeing that a lot of women that I work with. So Annie's was born as she started with 10 women and had that faithful class. It was a February of 2003, so you can imagine that somewhere in Illinois, right? A little cold and snowy, but these women persevered, and they went through 18 hours of training on 5 areas of risk management, and that's where it all started.
Wow. I love the fact that Annie married into the farming business. It's something that's come up on this podcast before about women who might start off kind of seeing themselves as the farmer's wife or a farming wife, but because they wind up being so involved in the farm, the line somehow blurs. And at some point you stop being the farmer's wife and you become a farmer yourself.
Right.
Because if you're out there, working, or even if you're in the house managing the business, that is farmer's work.
Right, exactly. It's, keeping the books. That's management work right there. And, keeping the books and knowing what's going on financially with the farm, a key area of farm business management. And then, of course, being out there doing the day-to-day work and then making the day-to-day decisions for the farm. That has been, I think, a transformative experience for many women. But unfortunately, even some women who are definitely farmers don't claim that space, right? They think that there can only be one farmer on the farm, and actually we can have multiple farmers on the farm.
Yeah, I agree with that. So what does the mission and action of Annie's Project look like? What are you guys doing today? And one thing you said that women are learning differently than men. I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about that too.
Well, our mission is to empower women in agriculture to be successful through education, networks, and resources. And so that really is key. And I will say that, we welcome all comers to Annie's Project. So we do have non-women that participate as well because we operate differently. We do focus on things that are a little bit different and maybe approach things a little bit differently than, other types of education. But, we really focus on, people's their skills, their natural abilities, the knowledge that they already have, and let that shine through. We don't treat and not to say that other programs do this, but that we don't treat our women as empty vessels that come lacking knowledge, that they come to the program with their own gifts and knowledge and skills, and we encourage them to be an active part of the conversation. And so Annie's Project, we have several different curriculum, but Annie's Project focuses on, having an expert come in and provide education on a certain topic, but it isn't death by PowerPoint. So it isn't like you're going to sit through an hour of PowerPoint and then people just ask questions. What's really important is that in every educational session we do that's a course, is that there is an active learning part that is part of it. So we encourage, that one of our parts of our methodology is making sure that, presentation, but then there's active learning. There's an activity that goes along with it because that really helps cement that knowledge, that understanding of what's happening. And that's so critical to people's learning. It's, especially, anybody, adults, kids, whoever, they need to have something that reinforces that and really truly engages them. And then also, I think we're different because we offer safe harbor. In other words, any questions are welcomed. People can share and people can also share what's going on in their operation if they so desire. But nothing is off limits as far as questions. We encourage people to let us know if they don't understand something. We're really trying to make sure that they gain a good understanding of what's important. And we also have small class sizes, which adds to that active learning, people getting involved. Nothing's off limits. That's a really critical part of just making sure that everything happens, the way it should.
Right. Something that kind of jumped out to me from what you were just saying is, a safe space to learn. And it actually reminded me of my mother because she went to an all-female college, and she made that decision because she said that she realized she would get more out of her education in a classroom full of all women than she felt she would in a classroom that was mixed. And she thought that way because she knew that she felt intimidated asking certain questions or putting herself out there and really engaging in the learning process if there were boys or young men involved. Do you think that there's anything like that at play here with your classes?
I certainly think so. Because especially now, let's go back to the example of where a woman who might not have a farming background marries into a farming operation and then decides that she wants to learn more. And so, if she goes to a class where it's primarily men, and we love men, nothing, but it's pretty intimidating. A lot of times in some of these spaces, in some of these areas, you might, and I've had the same thing happen, you might be the only woman in the room. And if you're the only woman in the room, it's, if you think that you are asking a question that might, that everybody else knows, and that, you might look at yourself as not being that bright bulb in the chandelier kind of thing, you're going to be intimidated and say, I maybe just not going to ask any questions here. I'll just sit back and then you're missing out on that opportunity, right, to get your questions answered and truly understand what's going on. And I think sometimes too, what happens with all of us, regardless of male, female, we have people that don't understand certain topics, but they're not going to ask questions because they feel that I'm going to look stupid in front of my peers, and I don't want that to happen. And that's why sometimes we do get mixed groups of people coming to our classes, because some people, they're real rookies and they don't want to feel like, the rookie in the room kind of thing. So, it's really important. The other thing, we teach the 5 areas of risk management. We make sure that at least in most cases, half our class time is devoted to that discussion and that hands-on, activity. It's really important too to make sure that when we're teaching that we provide unbiased and research-based information to our participants. So if they're going to come to something, we might have an expert that sells insurance, for instance. Well, it's not their opportunity to make an insurance sales pitch. It's their opportunity to educate people. And so we're very careful in vetting people and making sure that they know their stuff, that they have a good understanding, and that they're able to connect with their audience and not dismiss their audience. And sometimes that happens too, because we run into cases where people kind of look at us, oh, well, the little woman doesn't need to know that, because the little woman, and it's like, no, the little woman, whoever she is, needs to know that. So, right. And the other thing too is that we don't require that we have women speakers, but when there is a qualified woman, she's the one doing the training. And I think it's really important, we think it's really important to model that women have knowledge in this area, expertise, and that we really want people to engage. And again, it doesn't mean that a man can't engage with women. There's a lot of terrific men out there, but again, to really encourage that discussion and that people feel that connection, showing that women have knowledge, that kind of elevates that and says, oh, well, if she knows this, I can learn this too. And I think another thing that we do is that, like I said, we value the expertise of the women that are sitting in the room. So we really try to have an opportunity for people to interact, to network, that we have where mentoring is just kind of spontaneous. You might have somebody who has a lot of skill, let's say, she's been doing books on their farm for 20 years, and maybe you're talking about record keeping and you've got somebody who's really new. Well, this person that's been doing it for 20 years probably has some tips on how you could, streamline things, or how she does it. And maybe there's some things that they can exchange and learn. So from that standpoint, we try to have our classes be a little bit smaller as well. So that's another aspect. And I think, as we look at this, that making sure that women connect and network with each other and the professionals that we've invited to class is important. That safe harbor where, people feel welcome and that shared experience. And, I guess the other thing too is really helping people to discover. Again, not being just told things and fed a PowerPoint, but helping them discover and practice. And it makes sense then.
Yeah. I mean, it like you said networking, and I was just thinking, I was like, it sounds like a networking opportunity as well as a, educational opportunity. And it sounds almost like a discussion as well as, not just the sage on the stage style learning.
Right. So those are our courses. And not to say that we don't have things that might be more that sage on the stage person. We do offer some national webinars, for instance, on a particular topic. We do encourage people to be involved, in the discussion there. But it is a little bit different as far as the approach. It's not, we don't have half the time on a webinar devoted to an activity. And we have our own podcast too. So we have some things there that we've done. But our courses, we really truly want to make those an interactive opportunity.
Wonderful. All right, so what are some of the biggest challenges currently facing women in agriculture? Are there like specific barriers that kind of make it harder for women to take leadership roles?
So we're seeing kind of agriculture in general, more and more women being involved in all different aspects of agriculture, which is an absolutely terrific thing. And so we're seeing, in some ways, fewer barriers, right? That people are opening up to it. But I still run into this, and it's whether it's within, a course, or maybe it be we go out and we speak at an event. But we still find that in some arenas, and it's not just production agriculture, but other arenas, where you're kind of partially accepted and your knowledge and expertise isn't always valued. In some cases, many cases, you feel dismissed. And so that's a challenge. And talking to women who are more recently, especially graduated, it shocks them that there's still that going on, because when you're at college, university, you get great internships and all these wonderful things are happening, and you might be the big woman on campus and the world's your oyster. Mm-hmm. So then they go out into the work world and they're like, whoa, okay, that just happened to me. And some of it's pretty subtle and some of it's rather blatant. And I think sometimes it's purposeful, but I think other times it's just like, well, it's always been this way. And right. So, you walk into the cooperative and you say, well, hey, girls, what's going on? Well, you're not greeting the male customers like that. You're not saying, hey, boys, what's going on?
Right.
And that kind of thing. And I know I've run into it even myself. People kind of hesitating to talk to me, or in some cases, because I farm besides doing the Annie's work, and there are situations where somebody will come over and they'll start gabbing at my husband, assuming that he's in charge of everything, and he'll say, I don't deal with that. You'll have to talk to her about those things because that's her area. And then people look shocked, like, oh, what? It's a woman. Okay, I'm not sure if I can deal with this. So I think, we still run into those situations. And we had a situation in an Annie's participant who had gone through the class, the first course, the Annie's 101. And she had gone through that course and had learned a lot, made a lot of good connections. And unfortunately, her husband had gotten into a farming accident and passed away as a result of that. And all these people that they had working with them, their accountant, their attorney, all these people said, oh, well, you better sell out, your husband's not around you, but, basically giving her the advice that you need to sell because you couldn't possibly do this on your own. And that upset her. And she knew from her Annie's experience, she thought, no, I can do this. because I know my kids are interested in farming and I want there to be a farm for them to farm. So she fired all of her professional advisors and hired new ones who believed in her.
All right. Good for her.
And subsequently, the farm still continues. Her kids are now farming. And we're hoping that that situation does not happen, right, to everybody,
Right.
or anybody for that matter. But that's just kind of a testament to, if people have more knowledge, gain confidence, that's when they're really going to set the world on fire. They can do it. But that's what people need. And you might have all the education, but you also have to have the confidence. And I think that sometimes we're our own enemies. Sometimes we're lacking that. We're out there encouraging everybody else, but sometimes it's the voice within us that's telling us, oh, maybe I can't do this. Maybe, and just listening to the outside pressures. And it's like, no, you can do this. And becoming educated, networked, and confident, you can do it.
I love that. And I understand that completely. I mean, because I feel like that works on so many levels with women where, how easy is it to tell your friend, your sister, your daughter that, for example, like, you look great today, or, I'm so impressed with what you've been doing at your job. But how often do we tell ourselves those things?
Right.
And at the end of the day, that cheerleader really does have to come from within if you're going to wake up every day and keep going.
Yeah, exactly. It is so important. And sometimes, I think sometimes we're mean to ourselves too.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're not that good. Oh, who do you think you are? Those kinds of things. But we wouldn't tell that to our friends. We wouldn't tell that to our loved ones. Right? So why are we doing that to ourselves? So I think one of the barriers is ourselves. Society certainly has barriers that they've set up, but those things, if you really want to do something, go out and do it. Mm-hmm. March to that beat, whatever's calling you, whatever your passion is. Don't listen to those naysayers out there.
Right. Especially the one inside you, as we just said. Yeah. So what do you think the agricultural landscape is going to look like for women 10 years from now? Do you see things changing a little bit?
Agriculture is constantly changing. The world is constantly evolving. Sometimes things aren't changing enough or rapidly enough for women. There will be changes for sure. I think that women are going to have to drive that change more, not assume that it's just going to happen, but they're going to need to drive the change that they want to see. And I think it starts with women putting themselves out there more and not just being satisfied with, whatever roles traditionally have been assigned to women, or the fact that men usually serve on these boards of directors, or, people normally do these things, that they have an equal right to be actively participating in these things. And we've been doing that for a long time.
Yep. Just got to keep doing it.
But we've got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And, I look at it this way. It's that we have a tremendous amount of opportunities and challenges in agriculture. It is going to take the best and brightest of all of us, not just 50% of the population, of all of us, to solve the problems and take on the opportunities that we have ahead of us. And the bigger the table is, and that everybody gets invited to that table that wants to be part of that and making a positive difference in agriculture in the world, should be welcome to it. Because imagine what we could do. People get very controlling of their resources and their space. And sometimes they don't want to share because they think, okay, if I share this, if I share leadership, if I share doing this, that somehow that's going to diminish me.
Yes.
Or that, I don't want to give up my pie because if I, do that, then that's going to diminish me. And now Carisha and I, Carisha Devlin, who's my co-CEO, and I have been working together since 2019 as co-CEOs. Before that, it was just an all-volunteer board of directors, which we also served on prior to becoming co-CEOs. And if we looked at that way, if we just said, okay, well, we're just going to hang on to what's ours and that's going to be ours, and we didn't collaborate and work together, Annie's wouldn't be growing as it is. Mm-hmm. And wouldn't be providing education and networking opportunities to all the people that we're doing that for. And I think as we look at agriculture, and we look at the world and the problems that we have, the things that we need to do, if we look at, wow, there could be this humongous pie, and if we all got a slice of that pie, it's going to be way bigger than any little pie of our own, right?
Right.
So we need, anytime you want to grow things and make things better, you need to look for ways to bring people to the table. And women need to be part of that, and an active part of that, and not just some kind of afterthought. And so we can be much better at what we're doing if we figure that out and work collaboratively.
Gotcha. All right. So what do you find most personally rewarding about being involved with Annie's project?
I think, the big thing is just seeing the difference that you can make in people's lives, and then in turn their families, and in turn their farms or their agricultural businesses, whatever their role is. Seeing them grow and change and take on new challenges, and then them becoming mentors and coaches and teachers of others and continuing that on.
Yeah. I think that really fits in well with what you had said previously about we want to expand, we want to grow. Think of this in a mindset of abundance rather than a scarcity.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So I do like to hear that. Yeah. All right. So Doris, what does it mean to you to be a woman in agriculture?
Agriculture is life, and my life has always been about agriculture. From the time I was a small child to now, hopefully, a somewhat sage adult. I still have lots of learning to do, but I guess I really can't separate the two. This has been my life's dream and my life's work.
It's important work. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we are going to wrap things up there. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really enjoyed our conversation and learning a little bit more about Annie's project and the work that it's been doing.
Well, thank you so much.
That was such a cool discussion to hear you and Doris having. I have heard of Annie's project before, but I was not super familiar with it. So it was very cool to learn more about it. She made a comment about, it's probably likely that maybe you've been the only woman in a room full of men. And that is something that here, working at Lancaster Farming, I feel like I have encountered a few times where it's like I go to cover an event about the dairy industry or field crops or something that's fairly technical. And not necessarily I'm 100% the only woman, but it's like 95% men and a smattering of a woman or two.
You're in the minority.
Yeah. And I feel like especially early in my career here, I was very much like, oh my gosh, I don't belong in this room. Like I am in a room full of actual farmers and I have to somehow hold my own.
Right.
Yeah, very like imposter syndrome vibes. And I would just get very nervous like the whole time I'd be covering it. Like I need to make sure that this is a really good informative article because otherwise it's going to be like, oh, well, she just didn't know what she was talking about.
Right, yeah.
So that is something that I think I've gotten better over the years of like, if I walk in a room and there's not many women being like, it's okay. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this job for over 8 years now. Like I can do this. But yeah, it can be scary when it's like just you feeling a little out of place.
Right. She made a lot of good points. I mean, even just some little things, that she was talking about their instructors are aware of can make such a big difference. She talked about, address them as women. don't walk in and say like, hey, girls.
Yeah.
You know, which, look, when we're being informal, like I use the term girl sometimes to refer to adult women, but when it's in a professional setting, then I think it's something different. I mean, even on like a lighthearted note, like, you know, it's kind of the difference between the fact that we have Batman, but Batgirl, and we have Superman, and we have Supergirl.
Yeah.
It's not Superwoman. I mean, we do have Wonder
Woman, but no,
yeah.
It is. Well, that's actually something that I know, been very cognizant of. And this is something very lighthearted compared to a lot of other stuff we do here at Lancaster Farming. But, you know, we've been covering the dating show Farmer Wants a Wife, and we talk about it on the podcast. We write about it on the site. Not this podcast. We have a different one, the Farmer Wants a Wife After Party podcast. But that's something that since season 1, we've been very cognizant of, that we say typically either like the women or the ladies. Instead of saying girls, because
we would never say like the boys
on the show, like, oh, the boys went and did this. No, we wouldn't talk like that. So why would we say, oh, the girls went off and did this? You know, it's like, no, the women the women went. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just a limitation of the English language where we don't have kind of like an informal way to refer to grown women. Like you can say like guys for a group of men, but you don't really say it for a group of women.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Something just to think about, how just little things like that can make a difference. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for us. Thank you all for listening. If you liked this episode, please consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. And if you really like this episode, please consider leaving us a review.
If you have any questions about this episode, you can send us an email at farmhouse@lancasterfarming.com.
You can also find us on social media at Lancaster Farming on most platforms.
Thank you again for listening and visiting us at the Farmhouse. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Candace.
And we'll talk to you later.
Bye.
This episode of The Farmhouse is copyright 2025 by Lancaster Farming Newspaper, part of the Steinman Communications family.
It was written by Stephanie Spiker and Candace Worsbowski. It was produced by Eric Herlock and Justin Berger. The music is by Tin Bird Shadow.